The gunshot echoed across the Montana Valley like a thunderclap, sending a flock of startled birds into the darkening sky. Vivian Armstrong flinched, clutching her worn shawl tighter around her shoulders as she peered through the cracked window of her modest homestead. The 6-month-old baby in her arms stirred but didn't wake, a small mercy amid the growing chaos outside. It was 1878, and the West was still wild enough to make a widow with 7 children fear for her life when strangers approached. "Mama, there's men coming." Her oldest, 10-year-old Thomas, pressed his face against the glass beside her, his breath fogging the pain. 3 of them on horses. Vivian's heart hammered in her chest. 6 months since her husband James had been killed by outlaws, and each day had been a struggle to keep her children fed and safe. The farm was failing, winter was coming, and now riders approached at dusk. "Get the others to the back room," she whispered, passing the baby to Thomas. "Remember what I taught you." As Thomas herded his siblings away, Vivian reached for the shotgun above the door. It had been James's, and though the weight of it still felt foreign in her hands, she'd learned to shoot it well enough. She wouldn't let anyone harm her children. The riders slowed as they approached the house, and in the fading light Vivian could make out that one of them was slumped in his saddle, held up by the man beside him. Blood darkened his shirt. "Hello, the house," called the lead rider, his voice carrying clear through the evening air. "We mean no harm. My friend is hurt bad. We need help." Vivian hesitated, the shotgun steady in her hands. Strangers couldn't be trusted, but she couldn't turn away an injured man either. James would never have done that. "State your business plain," she called back, her voice stronger than she felt. "Name's Quincy McAllister, madam. My friend took a bullet from some bandits who jumped us a few miles back. He's losing blood fast." Vivian drew a deep breath. "Bring him in then, but your guns stay outside." The men dismounted, and Vivian watched as 2 of them supported the third between them. As they stepped into the pool of lantern light by her door, she saw that the injured man was young, barely more than 20. The lead rider, Quincy, was older, perhaps 35, with a weathered face beneath the shadow of his hat. She unbarred the door but kept the shotgun visible. "Lay him on the table." They entered, the spurs on their boots jingling against the wooden floor. The wounded man groaned as they set him down. "Thomas," Vivian called, not taking her eyes off the strangers, "bring my medicine box." Her oldest appeared quickly, eyeing the men with suspicion as he set down the wooden case of supplies. The baby had been passed to 8-year-old Sarah, who lingered in the doorway wide-eyed. "Get back with the others," Vivian told her children, and they reluctantly retreated. Quincy removed his hat, revealing hair the color of wheat touched by sun. "We're grateful, madam." "This is Charlie, and the one bleeding all over your table is Donovan." Vivian set aside the shotgun to examine the wound. "The bullet went through clean, but he's lost a lot of blood." She began cutting away the man's shirt. "I need hot water and whiskey if you have it." Charlie produced a flask, and Quincy moved to help with the water. As Vivian worked to clean and bandage the wound, she felt Quincy watching her. "You've done this before," he observed. "My husband taught me. He was a doctor before we came west." She didn't mention that James had been dead 6 months, or that she'd tended to him as he bled out from an outlaw's bullet, unable to save him despite everything he'd taught her. "You have a fine touch," Quincy said, handing her clean bandages. His hands were large and calloused, but his movements were gentle. When the wound was dressed and Donovan had fallen into an uneasy sleep, Vivian straightened, suddenly aware of the 6 pairs of eyes peering from around the corner. "It's all right," she said softly. "You can come out now." The children emerged cautiously. Thomas first, still protective, then Sarah with the baby. 7-year-old twins Rebecca and Rachel followed, holding hands as always. 5-year-old Henry clung to 3-year-old William's hand, though William was more curious than afraid. Quincy's eyebrows rose as the children filed into the room. "Well now," he said, a note of surprise in his voice. Vivian lifted her chin. "I have 7 children," she said, a statement that both explained and challenged. The cowboy smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he took in the sight of her family. "Then I'll build 7 beds tonight." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, and something in Vivian's chest loosened just a fraction. "That won't be necessary," she said, though the truth was they had been sleeping on pallets since selling most of their furniture to buy food. Your friend can take my bed tonight. I'll stay with him to watch for fever. Madam, Quincy said, putting his hat back on, I wasn't asking permission. It's getting too dark to ride out and we owe you for helping Donovan. The least I can do is make myself useful. He nodded to Charlie. Get the tools from my pack. Before Vivian could protest further, Quincy was asking Thomas to show him to the barn where they kept lumber. Charlie followed, and within the hour, the sound of sawing and hammering filled the homestead. Vivian tended to Donovan, fed her children a simple supper of cornbread and beans, and put the younger ones to bed in their makeshift arrangements. When she checked on the men in the barn, she was astonished to find they had already constructed 3 small but sturdy bed frames. How did you learn to work wood like this? She asked, watching as Quincy's hands moved with practiced precision. My pa was a carpenter before he took to ranching, Quincy answered, not looking up from his work. Taught me everything he knew. These are fine beds, she admitted. Quincy paused, looking up at her with those clear blue eyes. Your husband's been gone a while, hasn't he? Vivian stiffened. 6 months, how did you know? The way you handle things, the look in your eyes. He went back to his work. My sister was widowed young too, raised 4 children on her own. And did she manage? She did. She's running one of the finest horse farms in Kentucky now. He smiled again, that warm expression that softened his weathered face. You'll manage too, Mrs. Armstrong, Vivian Armstrong, Mrs. Armstrong, he nodded. You've got grit, that's plain to see, but everyone needs a helping hand sometimes. Vivian wanted to argue, to insist she was doing fine on her own, but the truth was too evident in the state of her farm, in the thinness of her children's faces. Thank you for the beds, Mr. McAllister. Quincy, please. Quincy. The name felt strange on her tongue. You can call me Vivian. She returned to the house, a strange feeling in her chest that she couldn't quite name. By morning, there were 7 small beds assembled in the children's room, complete with ropes strung for mattresses. The children marveled at them, bouncing experimentally on the frames. Donovan was better by morning, his fever broken. As Vivian changed his bandage, Quincy appeared in the doorway. We need to be moving on, he said. There's a ranch about 20 miles south that's hiring hands, and we aim to get there before the positions are filled. Vivian nodded, surprised at the disappointment that swept through her. Of course, your friend should rest another day, but he can travel if you take it slow. Quincy hesitated. I was thinking your place could use some work before winter sets in. That roof won't hold against snow and your corral is about to fall down. He twisted his hat in his hands. If you'd allow it, I could stay behind and help set things right. Charlie can take Donovan onto the ranch and secure positions for us. Vivian stared at him. Why would you do that? Because those 7 children need a roof over their heads, and you've got more courage than sense trying to do it all alone. She should have been offended, but his words held no judgment, only a pragmatic assessment that matched her own private fears. I can't pay you, she said finally. I'm not asking for payment. He met her eyes steadily. Just a place to sleep and whatever food you can spare. It was a risk, allowing this stranger to stay, but something in his steady gaze, in the careful way he had built those beds in the night, told her he could be trusted. All right, she agreed. Until the first snow, Quincy nodded once, as if sealing a pact. Until the first snow. Charlie and Donovan left after breakfast, promising to return in a few weeks when Donovan was healed enough to work. Quincy wasted no time, beginning with the most urgent repairs to the roof. Thomas followed him everywhere, eager to learn, and even the younger children found ways to help, carrying nails or holding boards steady. In the evenings, after the children were tucked into their new beds, Vivian and Quincy would sit by the fire. He told stories of his travels, the cattle drives from Texas, the gold fields of California, the vast open plains of Kansas. She shared tales of her life before, when James was alive, and they had dreamed of building a prosperous farm to leave to their children. He was a good man, Quincy said one night after she described how James had insisted on treating anyone who needed medical help, regardless of whether they could pay. The kind the West needs more of. Yes, Vivian agreed, her throat tight. He was. Your children have his kindness, Quincy observed. Especially Thomas, that boy has a good heart. It was true. Despite their hardships, her children had retained the compassion their father had instilled in them. Even little William shared his meager portions with the barn cats. Days turned to weeks, and under Quincy's skilled hands, the homestead began to transform. The roof no longer leaked. The corral stood strong. The barn doors hung straight on new hinges. He taught Thomas how to properly care for the horses and mules and showed the twins how to identify which plants were safe to gather for food. Most importantly, he began teaching Vivian herself how to mend a fence, how to predict weather from the sky, how to drive a team of horses. Things James had always handled, things she'd never thought she would need to know. "You're a quick study," he told her one afternoon as they repaired a broken wheel on the wagon. "I have to be," she replied, wiping sweat from her brow. "My children's lives depend on it." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. They're fortunate to have such a mother. The compliment warmed her even as she dismissed it. "I'm just doing what any mother would." "No," he said seriously, "not every woman would face what you have with such strength." Their eyes met, and Vivian felt a flutter in her stomach that she hadn't experienced since she was a young girl. She looked away first, focusing on the wheel. It was a dangerous feeling, this warmth that spread through her whenever Quincy was near. James had only been gone 6 months. Her children needed stability, not complications. And yet she found herself watching him as he worked, admiring the strength in his arms, the patience he showed with her children, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. One evening in late October, as the air turned crisp with the promise of winter, Quincy returned from town with supplies and news. "The railroad's hiring," he said as he helped unload the wagon. "They're laying track about 30 miles east, paying good wages." Vivian's heart sank. "You're leaving then?" He set down a sack of flour and looked at her directly. "I thought we might all go. There's a settlement growing up around the railway camp. They need a doctor or someone with medical knowledge. You could set up there, make a new start. Leave the farm." The idea was both terrifying and strangely liberating. The land had been James's dream, not hers. She had no particular attachment to it beyond the memories it held. "The soil here is poor," Quincy said gently. "You've seen that yourself. It's why so many homesteaders have abandoned this valley. But you have skills that would be valuable elsewhere. And the children, how would I manage them while working? The older ones could help, as they do now, and," he hesitated, "I would be there too if you wanted." The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. "Quincy," she began, uncertain what she wanted to say. He held up a hand. "You don't need to answer now. Think on it. Talk to your children. The railroad won't be moving on until spring at least." That night, after the children were asleep, Vivian sat alone by the fire, turning over Quincy's proposition in her mind. To leave the farm meant leaving James's grave, leaving behind the last physical connection to the man she had loved. But to stay meant continuing a struggle that grew more difficult with each passing season. The door opened softly and Quincy entered, carrying an armload of firewood. He added a log to the fire, then sat across from her, respecting the space between them. "I've upset you," he said quietly. "No." She shook her head. "You've only spoken what I've been thinking myself. This land is too poor to support us. I've known it for some time. Yet you've stayed. For James, for his dream." She looked into the flames. "But dreams can change, can't they? They have to sometimes." "Yes," he agreed. "They do." They sat in silence for a long moment, the fire crackling between them. "Tell me about the settlement," she said finally. "What is it like?" Relief crossed his face. "Growing fast. They're building proper houses now, not just tents. There's a school started already. A church being raised, and people from all over, not just Americans, but Irish, Chinese, Germans, people looking to make a new life." "Like us," she murmured. "Like you," he corrected. "I've never stayed anywhere long enough to call it home." "Why not?" He stared into the fire, his expression distant. "After the war, I couldn't settle. Too many memories, too many ghosts, so I kept moving. Ranch work, trail drives, whatever would take me somewhere new." "The war changed many men," Vivian said softly. "It did. But that's not an excuse for drifting forever." He looked up at her. "Your children have made me remember what it's like to belong somewhere, to be part of something that matters." "They're fond of you too," she admitted. "Even baby James reaches for you now." A smile tugged at his lips. "That boy's going to be strong as an ox, already has a grip like iron." Vivian laughed, the sound surprising her. How long had it been since she'd truly laughed? Weeks, months? "I'll speak to the children tomorrow," she decided. "See how they feel about moving. And if they want to stay. Then we stay and find another way." She met his eyes. But I don't think they will. Thomas already talks of nothing but the railroad, and Sarah asked just yesterday if we might live in a town someday with a proper school. Quincy nodded. Children adapt more easily than we do sometimes. Yes, she rose, suddenly aware of how late it had grown. I should get some rest. He stood as well, keeping the space between them. Good night, Vivian. Good night, Quincy. She paused at the door to her room. Thank you for everything you've done for us. It's been my privilege, he said simply, and she believed him. The next morning, she gathered her children after breakfast and explained Quincy's suggestion. To her surprise, they were unanimously enthusiastic. Can I work on the railroad too? Thomas asked eagerly. Will there be other children? Sarah wanted to know. Can we have a real house? Rebecca and Rachel asked in unison. Even little William seemed to understand, declaring, I want to see the train. Only baby James, too young to comprehend, continued playing with his wooden blocks, oblivious to the family discussion. Then it's decided, Vivian announced, looking to Quincy, who stood in the doorway. We'll go. The preparation for their move consumed the next 2 weeks. There was furniture to be built for their new home, possessions to be packed, arrangements to be made for the journey. Quincy rode to the settlement and returned with news that he had secured a small house for them, and that the railway company doctor was eager for Vivian's assistance. Through it all, the unspoken thing between Vivian and Quincy remained unaddressed. He continued to sleep in the barn, though the nights were growing colder. She continued to maintain the proper distance of a widow not yet ready to acknowledge new feelings, but the children saw. Of course they did. Children always see what adults try to hide. Do you like Mr. Quincy? Sarah asked one night as Vivian brushed her hair. Of course I do, Vivian answered carefully. He's been very kind to us. No, I mean, do you like him the way you liked Pa? The girl's directness was startling. Vivian's hands stilled on her daughter's hair. That's a complicated question, Sarah. It doesn't seem complicated to me. Pa's in heaven now and he'd want you to be happy, and Mr. Quincy makes you happy. I can tell because you smile more when he's around. Out of the mouths of babes, Vivian thought. It's not that simple, sweetheart. Why not? Why not indeed? Because of propriety, because of fear, because loving again meant risking loss again. Sometimes grown-ups make things more difficult than they need to be, Vivian admitted. Sarah twisted around to look at her mother. Pa always said life's too short for regrets. The words struck Vivian like a physical blow. James had said that often. It had been his justification for leaving his medical practice in Chicago to seek a different life in the West. Life's too short for regrets, Vive. Let's chase our dreams while we can. And now here she was, hesitating at the threshold of what might be a second chance at happiness. The day before they were set to leave for the railway settlement, snow began to fall. Light at first, then heavier, driven by a bitter wind that howled around the corners of the house. We'll have to delay, Quincy said, stamping snow from his boots as he returned from securing the animals. This looks to be a proper storm, Vivian nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. She had been ready to leave, ready to begin this new chapter. The children, too, were restless with anticipation. As night fell, the storm intensified. The wind screamed across the plains, driving snow against the windows in white sheets. Inside, they gathered close to the fire, Quincy entertaining the children with stories while Vivian mended clothes by the light of a lantern. When it came time for bed, the children reluctantly filed into their room. Vivian tucked them in, reassuring them that the storm would pass and they would leave as soon as it was safe. Returning to the main room, she found Quincy banking the fire for the night. You can't sleep in the barn tonight, she said. The temperature's dropping too fast. He straightened, brushing ash from his hands. I'll be fine on the floor here by the fire. Don't be foolish, Vivian said, surprising herself with her boldness. The bed is wide enough for two and we're both adults. Quincy's expression remained carefully neutral. I don't want to cause talk. Who's to talk? We're alone here. She met his gaze steadily. And frankly, Quincy McAllister, if you freeze to death in my barn, I'll never forgive myself. Now come to bed before the fire dies completely. A smile tugged at his lips. Yes, madam. They lay side by side in the darkness, a careful space between them, listening to the howl of the wind and the occasional pop from the cooling fire. Despite the propriety they maintained, there was an intimacy to sharing this space, to knowing another person was just inches away. "Vivian," Quincy said softly into the darkness, "there's something I need to say." She turned her head toward him, though she could barely make out his profile in the dim light. "What is it?" "I didn't stay just to help with the repairs." His voice was low, meant only for her. "I stayed because from the moment I saw you standing in that doorway with your shotgun, protecting your children, I knew you were someone special." Vivian's breath caught in her throat. "Quincy, you don't have to say anything," he continued. "I know it's too soon and you have your children to think of. But before we start this new chapter, I wanted you to know that I care for you, deeply. And if there ever comes a time when you might consider letting someone else into your heart again, I'd be honored if you'd consider me." Tears pricked at Vivian's eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered. "James was everything to me." "I understand," Quincy said gently, "and I would never try to replace him, but maybe someday there might be room for something new. Something different, but just as real." Vivian was silent for a long moment, wrestling with emotions she had kept carefully contained for months. "The children are fond of you," she said finally. "Especially Thomas. He needs a man to look up to. They're remarkable children. You've done an amazing job with them, Vivian, but you shouldn't have to do it alone." She turned onto her side, facing him fully now. "Sarah asked me if I liked you the way I liked James." Even in the darkness, she could see his smile. "Smart girl, what did you tell her?" "That it was complicated." Vivian hesitated. "But maybe it isn't. Maybe I'm making it complicated because I'm afraid." "What are you afraid of?" His voice was gentle, encouraging, losing someone again, feeling that pain. "That's a natural fear," he acknowledged. "I can't promise nothing will ever happen to me. No one can make that promise. But I can promise that while I'm here, I'll do everything in my power to bring happiness to you and your children." Vivian reached out, finding his hand in the darkness. His skin was warm, his fingers automatically entwining with hers. "I think," she said slowly, "that I would like to try, not quickly, not rushing, but yes, I would like to see what might grow between us." She felt rather than saw his relief, a subtle relaxing of his body beside hers. "That's all I ask, a chance." They fell asleep that way, hands joined, a promise in the touch that transcended words. The storm raged for 3 days, blanketing the world in white. When it finally cleared, the morning dawned brilliantly clear, the sun reflecting blindingly off the snow. Quincy and Thomas dug paths to the barn and cleared the wagon while the other children packed the last of their belongings. As Vivian stood in the doorway of the house one last time, she felt a curious mixture of sadness and anticipation. This had been her home with James, the place where 5 of her 7 children had been born, but it had also become a place of struggle and grief. "Ready?" Quincy asked, coming to stand beside her. She nodded. "Yes, it's time." He helped her into the wagon, where the children were already settled among their possessions. As they pulled away from the homestead, Vivian did not look back. Her focus was forward now, on the road ahead, on the new life waiting for them at the end of it. The journey took 2 days, the snow making the travel slower than anticipated. They spent one night in a small way station, crowded but warm, before continuing on. As they crested the final hill on the second day, the railway settlement came into view. It was larger than Vivian had imagined. A bustling small town sprung up from nothing in the span of months. Neat rows of houses, a main street with businesses, the imposing bulk of the railroad company offices, and beyond it all, the gleaming tracks stretching east and west as far as the eye could see. "There it is," Quincy said, pulling the wagon to a halt to let them take in the view. "Your new home." The children exclaimed in excitement, pointing out different buildings and the distant puff of a locomotive's smoke. "Our new home," Vivian corrected him, meeting his eyes with a smile. Their house was small but solid, positioned on the edge of town with a view of the mountains to the west. 3 rooms, a main living area with a kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. The children would be crowded in their shared room, but it was clean and warm and dry. The railway company doctor, an elderly man named Dr. Perkins, welcomed Vivian warmly, expressing relief at having someone to assist him with the constant stream of injuries and illnesses that plagued the workers and their families. "I'm semi-retired, you see," he explained as he showed her his small clinic. "Came out here thinking I'd have a quiet practice treating the occasional cold or broken bone. Never expected to be the only medical man for 30 miles in any direction." Quincy found work immediately, his carpentry skills in high demand as the town continued to expand. He spent his days building houses and businesses, his evenings with Vivian and the children. Their courtship progressed slowly, respectfully. Quincy took a room in the boarding house in town, though he spent most evenings at Vivian's home, helping with chores and playing with the children. On Sundays, they attended church together, ignoring the speculative glances of their neighbors. 3 months after their arrival, as spring began to soften the hard edges of winter, Quincy took Vivian for a walk along the creek that ran near the town. The water was high with snowmelt, rushing over rocks with a constant, soothing sound. "I've been thinking," he said as they paused to watch the water. "About us, about the future." Vivian felt her heart quicken. "Have you?" He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. Being with you, with the children, it's shown me what I've been missing all these years of drifting." "We've been happy too," Vivian said softly. "Happier than I thought possible after James died. I'm glad." He squeezed her hands gently. "Because I was hoping. That is, I wanted to ask if you would consider making it permanent." "Quincy McAllister, are you proposing to me?" Vivian asked, a smile playing at her lips. "I am." His eyes were serious, though his mouth quirked upward. "Not very eloquently, I'm afraid." "I should have prepared a proper speech." "No need for speeches," Vivian said. "Not between us." "Is that a yes, then?" In answer, she stepped closer and kissed him, a gentle press of lips that carried all the promise of their future together. When she pulled back, his eyes were shining. "I should probably speak to the children," he said. "Ask their permission properly." "They'll be thrilled," Vivian assured him. "They already consider you family." That evening after dinner, Quincy gathered the children in the main room. Even baby James, now a year old and taking his first tentative steps, seemed to sense the importance of the moment, sitting quietly in his sister's lap. "I have something important to ask you all," Quincy began. "As you know, I care deeply for your mother and for each of you." He looked at each child in turn. "I would like to ask your mother to marry me to become a family officially, but I wanted your blessing first." There was a moment of silence, then Thomas stepped forward. At 11, he was already showing signs of the man he would become, tall and thoughtful like his father had been. "Do you promise to always protect her?" he asked seriously. "With my life," Quincy answered without hesitation. "And us too, every one of you, always." Thomas nodded solemnly. "Then I say yes." The other children quickly added their approval, the younger ones jumping up to hug Quincy with unrestrained enthusiasm. Only Thomas held back, watching with a mixture of emotions on his young face. Later, after the others had gone to bed, Quincy found Thomas sitting alone on the front step of the house. "May I join you?" he asked, and at Thomas's nod sat beside him. They sat in silence for a few moments, looking up at the stars that spangled the clear spring sky. "I miss my pa sometimes," Thomas said finally, "even though I'm glad you're going to marry Ma." "That's as it should be," Quincy said. "Your father will always be your father. Nothing changes that, not ever. Will you mind if I still talk about him sometimes?" "Mind." "I'd be disappointed if you didn't. He sounds like a remarkable man. I wish I could have known him." Thomas looked up at him, his young face serious in the moonlight. "I think he would have liked you." Quincy felt a lump form in his throat. "That's a high compliment coming from you, thank you." "You make Ma smile again," Thomas continued, "and you built us those beds when we needed them, even though you didn't know us. It was the right thing to do. Pa always said you can tell a man's character by the things he does when no one's watching." Quincy nodded. "Your father was a wise man." They sat together a while longer, the comfortable silence of understanding between them. When they finally went inside, Vivian was waiting, her eyes questioning. Quincy gave her a reassuring nod. All was well. They were married in May, when the wildflowers carpeted the plains in a riot of color. The entire settlement turned out for the celebration, the first wedding many of them had attended since leaving their homes back east. Vivian wore a simple blue dress, her hair adorned with white blossoms gathered by her daughters that morning. Quincy wore the only suit he owned, purchased specifically for this day, his normally unruly hair tamed for the occasion. The 7 children stood with them as they exchanged their vows, a family being formalized in the eyes of God and their community. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, The cheer that went up from the assembled crowd startled birds from the nearby trees. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and more food than Vivian had seen in one place since before the war. As the evening wore on, she found herself sitting beside her new husband, watching their children dance with the other young people of the settlement. "Happy?" Quincy asked, his arm around her shoulders. "More than I ever thought possible again," she admitted, leaning against him. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice thoughtful, "that house is getting rather crowded." Vivian laughed. "It was crowded the day we moved in, true enough, which is why I've been working on plans for an addition. 2 more bedrooms, a larger kitchen, room to grow." She looked up at him, seeing the future in his eyes. "Room to grow," he smiled, that warm expression that had first begun to heal her heart on a cold autumn night. "If you wanted, someday, when you're ready." Vivian considered the idea, another child, their child joining the 7 she already had. The thought didn't frighten her as it once might have. "I think," she said slowly, "that might be nice, someday, not too soon, mind you." His laugh was warm against her hair. "No rush, we have all the time in the world," and they did. Time to build their home, to raise their family, to become a vital part of the community that grew around the railroad. Quincy's carpentry evolved into a thriving business as the town expanded, while Vivian eventually took over the medical practice when old Dr. Perkins finally retired in truth. The children grew, flourished, and began to make their own ways in the world. Thomas apprenticed to a lawyer who had set up practice in town. The twins discovered a talent for teaching and opened a small school. Sarah became her mother's assistant, showing the same steady hands and compassionate heart that had made James such a good doctor. And 2 years after their wedding, Vivian gave birth to a daughter they named Hope, a symbol of the second chance they had found together. On Hope's first birthday, as they sat on the porch of their now expanded home watching the older children play with their baby sister, Quincy turned to Vivian with a reminiscent smile. "Do you ever think about that night we met? When you stood in your doorway with that shotgun, looking like you might use it on us if we made one wrong move?" Vivian laughed, the sound free and easy now, a regular part of their lives. "I absolutely would have. I knew then," he said, taking her hand. "Something about the way you said I have 7 children, like you were daring me to be intimidated by that. And instead you offered to build 7 beds," she remembered. "That was the moment I began to trust you, though I didn't realize it then." "Best decision I ever made," Quincy declared, watching as Hope tottered unsteadily toward them, her small face alight with the joy of movement. "Saying those words, staying to build those beds. Everything good in my life came from that moment." Vivian leaned against him, content in a way she had never imagined possible during those dark days after James's death. "Everything good in all our lives," she corrected gently. Hope reached them, falling against her father's legs with a delighted laugh. Quincy scooped her up, settling her between them, and Vivian looked out at her family, all 9 of them now gathered in the golden light of the setting sun. From 7 beds built on a desperate night to this abundance of love and life, it was more than she had dared to hope for, more than she had believed possible. A second chance, not just for her, but for all of them. A new life built with care and patience, strong enough to weather whatever storms might come, and all because a cowboy had smiled and said 7 simple words that changed everything. "Then I'll build 7 beds tonight."